Today we remember one of the Cappadocian fathers, St Gregory of Nazianzus, often called St Gregory the Theologian. He's a preacher of great depth and significance. He's a friend of St Basil and St Gregory of Nyssa, and indeed St Basil is responsible for translating St Gregory the Theologian from being Bishop of Nazianzus to being the Bishop of Constantinople, which is obviously a much more prestigious position. And after a while, St Gregory realizes that there's too much administration to do, and decides that he will resign the episcopacy of Constantinople. But he realizes that he can't go back to becoming Bishop of Nazianzus again, because he's put a chap called Eulalius there. So he retires to study and to pray. And he's responsible for some orations, some speeches and sermons of very great profundity. And that is why we perhaps know of him today. We also notice that there are sort of parallels. A bishop who gets raised to a more prestigious bishopric and then resigns because he knows that he's not capable of dealing with the workload. Certainly puts me in mind of Pope Benedict XVI and how he did something very similar. And I've also seen it within Anglicanism too, whereby bishops and archbishops resign their post and take up more academic places. Rowan Williams comes to mind, and biblical scholar Tom Wright. Also Bishop Michael Nazir Ali, who of course is now a Monsignor in the Ordinariate. So it's not unheard of for bishops to realise that the task that they have is not for them, that it's a deal of humility, really. I mean, how often do we see people who enjoy a certain measure of power and recognition try to cling to it? And there have been bishops in the past who have done that, precisely that, to the detriment of the Church. It seems that some people go where they are strongest. And there's no shame in realising that one isn't cut out for the work in which one finds oneself. And the best thing to do is to try and find it. In Benedictinism, and I think I've said this before, there is an expectation that you have to be obedient to the best of your ability, even in impossible tasks. If you think the task is impossible, you talk to the superior and say, well, I can't deal with this. I can't do it because, and you list the reasons. Well, what if you are the superior? What if you are the abbot? What if you are the person in charge and you realise you can't do it? Well, then you've got a responsibility to the people below you, to the people whom you serve as a leader. And remember, that's how leadership should be, leadership of service, in the example of Christ. If you can't do it, then you've got to be able to find someone who can. You've got to give place. You can't cling on to power, because that's not how power works. Jesus himself says that power is service. The power of God is in humility. The power of God is realizing that you are to forge links with other people, to will their good, to build other people up, not to exalt yourself. Whoever is exalted will be abased. That's the rule. And it's quite obvious why. Because if love is meant to build up, then to have your own interests at heart all the time is not building anyone up, it's not loving, and you're on your own effectively. So, for St Gregory the theologian, to say, well, I can't be a patriarch of Constantinople. The task is too great for my skills. My skills aren't here. How best am I to serve the church? Well, I resign the patriarchy and I take up a quiet life of something I'm good at, study and prayer. And notice how he serves the church better like that. Too often we have very prescribed views of how a job should be. As children, you ask, what are you going to be when you grow up? And often you find yourself you find little ones saying, oh, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a fireman, I want to be a businessman. And so they come with these prescribed models, when really what needs to happen is for them to know their skills, to develop skills. And we too need to develop our skills, particularly those skills in Christ. Of course, those skills we Christians call virtues. And we need to think about each of the virtues that we can possibly use in our lives. So rather than look to power, which, interesting enough, that's in Latin, virtus has that element of power in it, but it isn't the power of controlling, of governing. It's not the power that tells people what to do for the exercise of your own will. No, the virtue that we are to... The virtues are essentially participations in the mind of Christ. We have to seek Christ as an example, so that we don't get power mad. And indeed, if you look at church history, as well as the history of the world, you look at church history, it is those who seek political power who damage the church most, who cause the divisions. One that comes to mind, Rehoboam in the Old Testament, succeeding King Solomon, tries to make himself bigger than his father, and therefore tries to exercise a greater sense of authority over the people, and it splits the kingdom. We see that again and again. St Gregory Nazianzus bids us cultivate virtue by participating in Christ, doing what Christ does. If Christ does something, he does it out of love. We are to do the same thing. We are to build each other up in love. And so by building each other up in love, by using the skills which God gives us to perform acts of love, we actually become more aware of ourselves. We become more aware of ourselves as we are. And that's, again, back to humility again, being who we are. And that sometimes is very hard to do in this day and age, because people expect us to be who they think we are. And we expect us to be who we think we are. The true you can only be seen in Christ. Because you are an icon of Christ, you should be reflecting Christ. And then if you reflect Christ, that is, if you do it perfectly, then you are the real you. Sounds complicated, but it really is the case of finding yourself in Christ. So that even if you are a really high-powered person, if you are the rich young man, you give up all that you think you need, so you can have something better. So St Gregory of Nazianzus, giving up prestigious position so that he can go and pray and study and find a deeper worth of God, and then give that to other people in what he writes. And do read his writings. They're really profound, really speak of the divine and human essence of Christ. So God bless you. God bless you if you are struggling with other people's expectations of you. God bless you that you may, in looking at Christ, have a better idea of who you are. God bless you if you have a burden upon you that seems too heavy to bear. God bless you that you may find a way of finding a cross that is yours and not somebody else's. For we all must bear our cross. And God bless you that through the cross, through humiliation, through serving God and building each other up in love, we may all come to love and be loved for eternity and know it. God bless you, and please pray for me.